So I'm introducing you to my new friend today. And it just so happened that I was on her podcast recently, The Health Fix. And Janine Krause is like, she takes things that I actually don't know anything about and makes it knowledgeable. So, what we're talking about today is actually blood panels. And here's how I handle my blood panel when I get it done. If nobody calls me and says there's something wrong, I don't even look at it. Like, talk about head in the sand. And that's not entirely true, but it's pretty damn close. Pretty damn close. I'll do that like screen, quick rundown. I don't see anything that looks horrific. There's no black, red marks on my score. So I'm done. Right. But I have somebody for you to meet who actually can look at this and tell you what's going on in your body and what you need to do. So I am so excited to have Janine on today because you're just going to realize that when we fall in the range of normal, that probably isn't telling us much, is it? So tell us a little bit about yourself. And thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thanks, Kelly. It was a pleasure meeting you the other day, and it's fun to be able to talk about labs. And I'm a naturopathic doctor by trade and an acupuncturist, and I just fell in love with being able to look at labs and help people kind of get little insights because I was noticing a lot of people coming in and saying, kind of like you said, like nobody ever called me, so I guess my labs are okay. And then I'm looking at these labs and going, well, there are things that we can optimize because that normal range is normal, yeah, but chances are, if you're listening to this podcast, you are not trying to be normal. You are trying to be exceptional. And that's where these
Wow.
lab readings on my end are kind of my jam. We try to help folks
Wow.
be exceptional.
What a great way of putting that, right?
Mhm.
I mean, what a great way. Thank you. So tell us, you you actually consult with people on their labs.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I as a doc, I did primary care for a long time. I'm 18 years in at this point and, did the whole doctoring thing and I liked it. Group coaching, tried that out. It was okay. But what I really enjoy is looking at people's labs, giving them insights and going, "Okay, now you know." And then going, "Okay, who's the best coach I can hook you up with to take you to the next level?" And so that's kinda how I got into this side of things and really deciphering labs, and I decipher labs from pretty much the basic ones we get with our doctor, the blood labs, and then I also will do specialty lab testing, like there's something called the Dutch test where you can tell what's going on with your hormone metabolism. I'll look at saliva hormone metabolism. I'll even look at things like mold toxicity and even like autoimmune panels. And I also like usually when I'm looking at labs and if I see a trend, I'm gonna be like, you might wanna consider doing these particular labs just to get a little more information. And that's kind of how my practice works. That's how I fell into it.
Wow. Okay. So you have offered to take my labs and look at one set of the panels. And I have to tell y'all, just so you know, I had this blood work done back in December. I tried to log into the portal, couldn't log into the portal. Nobody called me from the doctor's office. I was like, oh, okay. And I never thought about it again before. This is so embarrassing because like I'm all about like get fit and be healthy. And I'm also like all about stick your head in the sand. So I'm going to do a screen share. If you're on YouTube, what you're going to see is all the lab panels. If you're not on YouTube and you're listening on the podcast, then you're just going to hear Janine go through everything and explain what's going on. So here's a quick
And
screen share, and let's see if we can make this work. This might be
yeah,
pretty
it's good.
exciting.
It's
Okay.
good. And then for those of you guys who are listening and audio only, I'll make sure that I explain kind of what I'm going through so that if you did have some labs in front of you and you ran through it, you can kind of pinpoint the things and kind of go from there. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to go through the comprehensive metabolic panel. And this is something that docs will often order. And yes, much like Kelly, there's no shame involved in that, Kelly. Most people, if they don't hear from the doc, that's like no news is good news. That is standard. In my office, if my people are like, wait, you didn't call me in like, a week after my labs came back. What's going on? Because they expect me to do that. And I do because I love going over this stuff. So what we're looking at here on the screen is part of the chem panel, and we'll go through different components. Now, one of the things I will say is that there is a difference between a comprehensive and a basic chemistry panel. And so if you don't have everything that we are outlining in your labs, that is okay. It is absolutely okay if you're following through with us and you stop this and you go grab your labs and you look back through. It's just what your doctor chose to run. Now, with this information, I'm going to give you like a little preface of what we can learn from a comprehensive metabolic panel. So we can learn about your kidney function, we can learn about your liver function, we can learn about your electrolyte balance, so sodium, potassium, chloride. And what that means is if things are on a low normal basis and you're kind of tired and you're crashing in the afternoon, we can see that here and give you an insight as to what to do. So many people are tired all the time. So this is one of the reasons I do this panel. Now, what I can also see from this panel is if you're doing your breath work. That's another kicker here. So we'll talk about that. And then we can also tell what's going on with muscle mass in the body. And we can tell how overall you're doing with your protein intake as well as your blood sugar balance. So let's dive into it. So right here, we've got bilirubin on the top. Bilirubin is a marker for red blood cell breakdown. And if it ends up being really low, and in this case, we don't have the full ranges, but in this case, the 0.2 that Kelly has, that is decent. If it's like 0, I am going, okay, we're not turning over red blood cells. What's going on? Keep in mind that what we're looking for here is things that are way out of range. And typically with bilirubin, we're looking for things that are super high. That's more of the abnormal. Now, a lot of people will end up over 1.2, they'll end up 1.4, even 1.5. Not super crazy out of the range. I recommend not panicking, but what I do recommend is go back and look at some of your other labs. If every bilirubin you've had since the beginning of lab testing on you is a little bit elevated, you could have something called Gilbert's, which is, and it looks like the word Gilbert or the name Gilbert, but what it is a condition genetically that you're just a little slower at turning over red blood cells. No big deal. So, what does it have in terms of implication for your health? Well, it just means that your liver is just going to be a little bit bogged down. So, folks like that might need a little more antioxidants. So, your blueberries, your berries, or you could get fancy and go quercetin and resveratrol, things of that nature. Now, if your bilirubin is 3 or 4 in terms of the total, now there's something going on with the liver. You definitely want to go seek that out. So you want to be thinking in terms of quantification of how high are we going over the ranges. So if we're just a little hair off, that means there's some optimization that could happen. If it's double or triple the higher end and normal, this is when you do want to seek help or specialists. And usually your doctor's going to say something to you in this case, but sadly, I have found that some cases we don't hear from folks. So this is why I want folks to be proactive too, just because, hey, it's a busy medical world and sometimes things happen. So got to be our own self advocates. So with BUN, this is blood urea nitrogen. This is a kidney function marker, but it also tells you how good you are at turning over proteins in the body and detoxing nitrogens, because nitrogens are one of the endpoints of protein metabolism. And so I'm looking for this to be somewhere between, yes, the range 8 and 13, but I'm hoping that it's going to be a little bit more kind of how Kelly has here, that 15, 18-ish, 10. 10's kind of on the lower end of my let's say comfortable level. And so somewhere between that 12 and 16 is okay. 18's a little extra stellar. And that also means that Kelly's probably eating okay amounts of protein. We'll check up on her when we see the protein total here in a minute. But this is a good marker to keep an eyeball on. If it starts staying high and you're not eating extra protein, so meaning you're not eating over the amount of grams of protein of your body weight. So say you weigh 150 pounds and say you're eating 150 grams of protein a day, that number will tend to be a little bit higher. But if it's going over this, now the kidneys might be having some trouble to break down that protein. And so you want to kind of think, okay, what can I do there? Now, this next marker here, that BUN and creatinine ratio, that is a combination of this number down on the bottom, creatinine, and this number up here, the BUN. What that ratio tells us is really that those two numbers are in line. If the two numbers are in line, the ratio is going to be in line. If one number is wildly high and the other one's wildly low, your ratio be off. It's like a second check and balance for the kidney function. So we've got a decent range here for that ratio. Now I'm going to skip down to the creatinine down on the bottom just because it is part of the ratio. Creatinine is a number you want to be paying attention to as you get older. And the reason being is the lower it goes, the more it is linked to muscle wasting. None of us want our muscles to be wasting as we get older, because obviously if you're in the Fittest Freedom group, you are wanting to be out hiking, biking, doing rafting, kayaking, you name it, you want to adventure. You want that number here for this creatinine to be in like Kelly has here in the 0.73. I would be doing anywhere between there and the 1.02. You want to maintain that number in a good spot. So she's doing great here. If that number all of a sudden starts to dip down and you haven't been as active as you used to be, you're losing some muscle. Really important thing to pay attention to as you get older. Did you have any idea about that, Kelly? Did you know that number?
No, I had
Anything?
zero idea.
Okay.
Zero idea.
That one's probably like out of these one of the biggies, especially for longevity. So everybody pay attention to that one. The next one's calcium. Now, a lot of folks have kind of on, let's say in social media over the years, demonized calcium and saying, oh, it's going to clog your arteries. Don't take it. It's not wonderful for you, blah, blah, blah. Well, we do need some calcium. It is a mineral that helps our bones. Most of us kind of know that, but it's also a mineral that's really important for energy. So what I can tell here is that Kelly's keeping her calcium up. It's at 9.7. If calcium creeps over 10, I am starting to worry about the body not using the calcium effectively. And what that means is bone density. So in the US, we usually will be able to get DEXA scans now over 60, but that's your bone density scan. But for some folks, we can predict if your bone density is dropping off by having higher calcium scores. That's one thing. The other side of it is, could your vitamin D be low? And I definitely want folks testing that. Kelly's, we looked at it. It was great. It was at 47. So we know that her calcium at 9.7 is an okay number. It's good. But if you're noticing you're fatigued, you're burnt out, your bones ache, and your calcium level on your chem panel is 8, in the 8 range or lower, or on the lower end of a range, because let me give you one little tidbit here. A lot of these ranges will be different depending on the lab. So if your numbers are low normal on calcium, this is a warning sign that either your vitamin D is low or you're getting burnt out, kind of fatigued, and your body's blowing through calcium. Calcium helps us with depolarization in terms of muscles. So sodium and potassium create the signal, but calcium helps with that muscle contraction. So if we're getting muscle aches, we're getting crampy, we're even getting bone pain, we do want to consider what is going on with our calcium and supplement accordingly if this number's on the low end. So Kelly's doing great, but something to think about when you look at calcium. Now, chloride is one of our markers for electrolytes. And I usually like to look at sodium, potassium, and chloride all together. And we'll get there in a second. It's going to be in a different screen, but the chloride at 104 is a great number. Between 104 and 108, I'm happy with chloride. If it's creeping down below and it's like 100 or less than 100, I'm going, okay, we need a little chloride. Where does chloride come from? Sodium chloride, salt. So we're going to recommend salt, and not just any kind of salt, things like Redmond's salt. It's got the minerals in it, and it is a pure salt, not a salt that happens to have dextrose, sugar in it. Read your
Really?
salt
Salt
containers.
has sugar in it? No
Read,
way.
I was blown away. I never thought that was the case. And I picked up a couple of salt containers at the grocery store, and sure enough, I looked at it. It said sodium, chloride, and then dextrose. Why is there sugar in salt? Oh, I'm sure it was like explained as an anti-caking agent or something, but read your salt things, just see, I can't say for all companies, but I read that one and like almost fell on the floor at the grocery store. I was like,
Well,
what?
yes. I mean, I've never looked at my salt label because I thought salt was salt, that's salt.
Me too. So when I saw that, I was like, oh my, it was probably like 2-3 years ago as I did this. I even did an Instagram video on it. So I was like, no, really, it says dextrose, because I actually bought it because I wanted to prove that I was not crazy. So anyway, that was a wild thing that happened. What the heck? So something to be aware of. And this is why I recommend like Redmond's real salt or Celtic salt and just really knowing where your salt's coming from. It's important. So chloride, Kelly's chloride level is great. Her electrolyte, that one is good. We'll check the rest of them. Next is the carbon dioxide, CO2. And I can tell if you're under breathing, if your CO2 levels are low. So anything under 24, kind of 23, 24, I'm going to ask someone, how's the breathing going? And I might get a deer in the headlights look, but the truth is how you breathe depends on how well you release oxygen to your tissue. So it's an energy thing. And when CO2 is low, what happens is we are not able to trigger our body to release oxygen effectively. So we actually want a little bit of carbon dioxide to build up in the system. Now, I could do a whole like 4-hour dissertation here on like acid base balance and things of that nature and how that plays into carbon dioxide, which it does. But in this case, I'm really going to the basics here, breathing, because most of us are not taking long enough exhales. And so Kelly's doing good here. Could she improve a slight bit? Sure. But anywhere between that 24 and 30 range, I know they're higher end of normal's 29 here, but I like 24 to 30 for a carbon dioxide level. So Kelly's
Spend more
breathing.
time breathing out.
Yes, the exhales. It's all about the exhales.
Interesting. Okay. All
Longer
right. Well,
exhales, better.
awesome. I am going to hop over here and grab you another screen share.
Hey,
I am mesmerized. I have to tell y'all. It doesn't matter if it's my blood panel or someone else's. I had no idea.
yeah. Isn't it crazy? It's crazy to think about that there's more details. And you know, a lot of folks might be thinking, well, where have you got this information from? Well, research, but also life and really just noticing patterns in patients in their labs over time and then correcting it and seeing things improve. And that's kind of a lot of my practice is trial and error and you know really using what I see in research and then testing it to see, well, does that really translate in a person versus a rat or whatever's been studied. So we've
Yeah.
got some repeats here just because of the screenshots,
Right.
and that's okay. We're going to go down below here to the EGFR. What in the world is that thing? That is known as glomerular filtration rate. That's that EGFR. And so the filtration rate is how well your kidneys are doing in terms of filtering things just in general. It's basic, the most basic marker for kidney function here. The creatinine above it gives you a little bit, that bun gives you a little bit, but the filtration, if your kidneys can't filter those creatinine and bun levels, so your nitrogen levels and your creatinine levels are going to be off. And at 92, this is a great number. Your kidney function is great. I want things over 90 because one of the things a lot of docs won't tell you, and honestly, I had to actually read enough of these labs, and you can see it right there in the black and white. It says, you know, we've got normal over 90, and then it says high 60 to 89, mildly decreased kidney function. No one told me in school much about this. And if they did, I don't remember. I may have been sick that day. I doubt it. I think what happened is we get stuck on looking for certain parameters and don't know like what, you know, we just don't go there. I don't know. But this is disturbing because if your kidney function is between 60 to 89, that's a compromised kidney. Nobody wants compromised kidneys. So why does that happen? Well, oddly enough, overhydration, people carrying around too many jugs of water. I see that often. And in some cases, it's not worth that much water. And, you know, I'm not going to debate that here, but it's things to think about. If you're hydrating and you don't really know how much water you're supposed to get, the baseline is half your body weight in ounces of water a day. And then it varies with ounces based on sweating. And I'm sure Kelly can go into that in terms of the hiking and different things. But we don't need to get a blanket like statement of, oh, I'm going to drink 2 gallons of water a day if you weigh 110 pounds. I mean, that's too much. It's a high load on your kidneys. And I've seen some things happen to patients of mine over the time just because they thought they needed to stay more hydrated. So answer here is this EGFR is a really good way to tell you what's going on with your kidneys. And if there's any issues, we're looking at environment. We're looking at even breathing that's tied back into kidney function. We're looking at red blood cells, and that's a whole nother test. But you want to look at your whole lifestyle. if your kidney filtration is down. And think about what kind of chemicals and toxins could be impacting your kidneys. Most people are kind of prone to think that it's always protein intake, and it's not. It's more going back to what has happened in toxins and chemical level in your body. What's going on? Like, how many supplements are you taking? If you're taking 25 supplements and you're eating McDonald's, your kidneys may be compromised because you've got the toxins from eating out, and now you've got, a whole bunch of supplements trying to come in. The other thing is quality of supplements. That is super important. A lot of fillers and junk in some of the commercially based supplements that are at Walgreens or, over the counter pharmacy. So that's another thing to really pay attention to. The cleaner, the better. So
Wow.
yeah, like kidneys, who would have thought, right?
Right.
Something to pay attention to. So yeah, we want to keep that in the 90s, keep them super healthy. And there are certain things you can do. There's amino acids that are really nutritive to kidneys, like glutamine and things of that nature. But the point is just keeping an eyeball on it. And if you see it drop all of a sudden, look back at your lifestyle and go, did I change some things? And could anything in terms of exposures, changes in lifestyle stuff impact my kidneys? So thinking about that. Next one is globulin. Globulin is one of our proteins. And globulin is one that can, if it's high, we're going, okay, what's happening? Are we getting enough protein? Okay, yes, but why are we have so many globulins? Globulins are what we use to make immune system complexes. So what does that mean? Like your antibodies and your reactions to allergies and things of that nature. Sometimes globulins will be higher if we're having an immune reaction to a bug or if we're having an immune reaction to, say, seasonal allergies. So I tend to look at those in that respect. Kelly's a little bit on the lower end and normal here, but I believe her protein was normal. So I tend to look at that and go, I'm not going to worry about it too much. Now, if Kelly told me my gut is trashed, I'm having a hard time with my immune system, it doesn't seem like it's working, I get sick every single time I turn around, I'm going to go, do we need to help with the body to make some immunoglobulins? Do we need to boost the immune system? Right now, it's really hot for folks to be talking about colostrum. Have you heard this rage of colostrum? Goat
Oh,
colostrums? No. Yeah, it's all the rage for the healing the gut lining. And I laugh a little because it was probably the first thing I learned at Bastyr back in the 2000s when I was going to school. That was like the gut heal everything. And it kind of goes in waves. Like it was out of style and then now it's coming back up. And really having lower globulins in my mind is going, do we need to do something about the immune system? And so with any lab, when you're looking at this objectively, you do want to look back and go, am I having any symptoms that would correlate with this being a little bit low? If you're not, don't try to fix something that's not broken. Just kind of go, okay, probably I'm fine here. And then watch it for the next lab. And by the way, I recommend doing these kind of labs at least twice a year so that you can look for trends and know what's going on.
right. I'm sitting here thinking, okay, this was 4 months ago, right? So I'm going to
Mhm.
give myself a couple of months. I'm going to get it again. I'm going to go
Mhm.
in. I'm going to hire you, and I'm going to be Dr. Kraus. Check it out. Tell me what to do. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's one of those things we have to think realistically here. I don't want anyone jumping to the gun, with these labs if it's not wildly abnormal. It's more just information to go, could there be some lifestyle things that I could change? Or is there anything correlating? Like in this case of the globulins, are you having more gut issues? Are you having more issues with the immune system? And if you're not, then okay, keep an eye on it. If you are, there could be a little bit of telltale here as to why that number is not optimal. So, something to think about. Something to think about. And then the last one here is the glucose. These tests for the chemistry panels are spot glucoses, meaning you're having the glucose taken right in that moment. If you didn't fast, your blood sugar or glucose might be a little bit higher. Optimal
this was
blood
not
sugar.
fasting.
And
Yeah.
so then I kind of sense that based on your A1C, which is your blood sugar over time. Kelly's A1C was a good number. I believe it was 5 if I saw it right in there somewhere. But nevertheless, I knew she had a good A1C, which is blood sugar over like 3 months on average. Let's call it that. And what that A1C is really telling us is how sticky is Kelly's blood over time because blood sugar is sticky blood. And in her case, I knew that this number 94 is probably not a fasting number. And so 94 is fine for not fasting. If it's over 126 and you weren't fasting or you were fasting, That's the number at which conventional medicine has taught us that, "Ooh, we better repeat that and see if we get a repeat high number." That's where we're like, "Uh-oh, something's up with blood sugar." In a fasting glucose, optimally is between 80 and 90. I flux a little bit down in the 70s if someone tends towards just not eating carbs very much. But for a carb eater, 80 to 90 is a good blood sugar range, especially if you were fasting. If you didn't fast, somewhere between the 80 up to like 100, 105 or so is okay. Once we start getting up towards that 126 magic number, then I start to go, could we have some blood sugar issues happening? So if you've been looking at your chem panels and you go back and you look and your blood sugar's on the high end of normal every single time that you had your blood drawn, you want to think about, am I getting enough protein and balancing my blood sugar? Do I have a cortisol issue? Stress. And if you have a fear of blood draws, sometimes this number we got to use other things to gauge, because sometimes your cortisol's up and your blood sugar is going to be up from them too. So we do realistically have to include that too. So that's this
Question.
round.
Okay,
Yeah,
can I ask you a question about this?
absolutely.
Should we be going and getting these blood panels done on a fast?
Great question. You know, there's been a ton of debate on that. And I actually just had this debate yesterday morning with a patient of mine. If I suspect that someone is having blood sugar issues, I actually want to do it in fasted and non-fasted so I can see the difference between the two.
Oh, very wise. I like that.
Yeah, I'm geeky. I mean, chances of having a doc do that, you probably need a functional naturopath, somebody, naturopath or functional medicine doc who'd be like, sure, let's do it. Um, I like to see both versions of it. Now, do you have to do it back to back? No, but technically I wouldn't mind back to back, meaning like one day you go in and you're fasting, the next day you go in and you're not, because I don't want someone changing their complete lifestyle and habits between one test and the other, and then we really don't know.
Right.
But the the answer on things is it depends on what we're looking for. If I suspect that someone's having trouble with blood sugar, I typically will want to see both. If someone doesn't indicate that they're having trouble with blood sugar, their labs look okay in that department, I'd probably be like, it's fine to go non-fasting and let's just see what we got. But I want to know what's happening with the food in the system and the food not. It's important
Yeah.
to me.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's like apples to apples, and there's so much of a change when you do certain things. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had people like the fella I was debating with this yesterday, him and his wife. I had him go back and get another one just so he could see the difference because he had a protein shake before his test and it did shoot up his blood sugar. And I was like, well, I need to know for sure that that's a thing. So, yeah, it's it's fun. It's fun to look at that and really get to
You're
you can
getting
see
me
I geek.
excited about this now.
I I hope to get people excited because I mean these are really easy ways to learn about your body. And honestly, if you want to pay cash and you don't want to do insurance, I mean these things are like $15. It's nothing crazy. It's
Right.
to get a decent amount of information on yourself. In this day and age, you can order all these on your own. You don't
I
even
love
need.
that. I love that. And, we should know these things because truthfully, like in all these years, all my life, I have never, ever actually had a doctor tell me anything about a panel. Isn't
Yeah.
that it? I mean, now that I'm saying that out loud, I'm like, wow, Kel, why didn't you ask? But you do ask, right? And they say, oh, everything's normal.
Eh, that's
Yeah.
usually the standard. And unfortunately, I mean, the way the system's set up, we have 15 minutes, and when you're running the
Right.
insurance model, you have 15 minutes. And boy, you got to highlight really what you want to talk about. And if you need a prescription, I mean, it makes sense. It's the system's not set up for preventative. It really
Yeah.
isn't. It
Yeah.
sucks. So this one has the potassium, the sodium, and the protein. Now, potassium, this marker, if this is low, so what I consider low on potassium is anything under 3.8. If you're under 3.8, I am going to be going, it may be worth it to add a little bit of potassium into your world. Now, what is potassium? You could do electrolyte drinks, sure. And I don't mean Gatorade. I'm talking about like LMNT, things like that, things that have not a whole bunch of crazy amounts of sugar and dyes. Now, the other easy trick that most people have in their cabinet right now is cream of tartar. If you make biscuits, you have potassium bitartrate in your cabinet right now. And you can use a little 16th of a teaspoon, throw it into your water, throw it on top of food. That'll help to bring your level up regularly. And a crazy thing with the potassium is that sometimes ladies will tell me, gosh, I wake up all night peeing. I have no idea what's wrong with my bladder. It's wild. Try a little potassium bitartrate, a little cream of tartar between like 1/16 to like a quarter teaspoon in some water before, like, maybe 1 or 2 hours before bed, so that now we're not adding water to the mix, and see if you sleep better. See if you don't wake up as much.
Wow. I've never heard
Yeah.
this in all my studying over all these years.
It's an old school folk naturopath thing, really old school, but it's something that can be helpful. Does it help everyone? No, but for some people, if that's the issue, perfect. Now, I'm always asked, like, what is too much potassium like in the system? It can be heart palpitations, it could be feeling jittery, but not enough palpitation or not enough, not palpitations, not enough potassium. There is no, there's no case where there's not enough palpitations. But in the case with potassium, really what people are with potassium, if you're feeling a lot of the same jittery, weak, kind of just shaky, a lot of people will feel the potassium more than the sugar in some cases. Sugar's like
Wow.
hangry, the
Right?
potassium's like the shaky weak. And
Okay.
and so like you've probably seen this with hikes, like if someone's bonking,
Right.
if if there's, like, 2 different ways you can go. There's a person that's like, "Man, I am just really hungry and I'm getting," and they're just kind of powering down. And then there's the person who's like, "I'm okay, but I'm, like, shaky. I'm feeling weak." That's your potassium kicking in. It's also, some of the cramps and stuff that people would associate with it as well. And yeah, your number is great at 5. Like, if you can maintain how you're keeping your potassium up, great. Oddly enough, pistachios have a lot of potassium in them, so I'm always having folks thinking about that. Bananas, yes. This is why these are the things that people bring on hikes. I'm sure you've got that dialed
Well,
for
actually, a question about that. So if
Mhm,
somebody like the bonking, like what I call, you get dumb, that's one
mhm,
kind. But when they get the shaky one, would you suggest a potassium pill? Like I carry sodium pills and potassium pills in
mhm.
case somebody looks like they're going south. But is that a good idea? Or am I just trying to kill my people?
No, no, no. In the moment when it's like that and you're out in the woods or you're out like 3/4 up a 14er, absolutely use the pills. Absolutely. Because they gotta get back down too, and the
Right.
body's gonna
Right.
suck it up really fast. It's when, someone's on a I kinda feel shaky, but I'm not really sure. The other people you have to watch is, like, if someone has a tendency towards, like, heart palpitations in the first place, or POTS, which is happening a lot more, the postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And if that's happening, then we got to be careful with the potassium. But no, the pills are not a bad thing. And I'm being conservative on my 1/16 to 1/4. I've had people do a teaspoon to 2 teaspoons of the cream of tartar, just depending on where their levels are at and how they feel. And, like, if someone's already telling me they feel weak, they feel jittery, I'm like, "You're getting the potassium." And if you're starting a hike and someone's like, "Man, I just feel so nervous about this today," I'm like, "Potassium, take it." Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, no, I don't think you're doing the wrong thing. I think that's perfectly in alignment with what folks need. Absolutely. Now, sodium is kind of the other half of that chloride there that we saw earlier. 140's decent. It's kind of the lower end. I like it kind of more 142, 145 for a perfect sodium, especially if someone's going to go out and hike. And obviously, I know we can't run these labs right before a hike, but you could run them a couple weeks before you're going to go on a big one and know where you stand with your electrolytes. And really, some of the times I'll have people run them at like a day or two after they did a training just to see where things are at. Your liver enzymes might go up a little bit and we just know that, but it is interesting to see where the electrolytes go to know how much you're pulling in terms of your electrolytes. So in Kelly's level here, I'd probably say she definitely needs electrolytes after workouts, and she probably needs some electrolytes mid-morning. And so those of you who are listening right now, if you struggle with energy and you crash mid-morning or mid-afternoon and you've dealt with the blood sugar, you got that dialed in, the next thing is considering a little bit of sodium, so Redmond salt, and possibly if your potassium's a little low, throw in a little potassium in there and a little calcium carbonate or calcium citrate. You can throw it into a little mix, your smoothie, a shake, or whatever, or you could add these at night too for recovery. But it is a
Hmm.
thing to think
Super
about.
interesting because, like, I do everything I can to avoid much sodium simply because I think that, you're supposed to avoid sodium. That was the old thing, right?
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. We've been brainwashed on that one. And unfortunately, what the difference is sodium, if you go out to eat, is a different type of sodium than Redmond salt or Celtic salt, because these are mineral salts. The salt from Morton's is just sodium chloride, and then, as I mentioned, could be dextrose depending on, what brand or what's happening. And so we have a difference in those salts. Those types of salts that do not have the minerals with them do not replete you like the I'm saying it backwards. The salts with the minerals do replete you. The ones that you get with like your processed food or out to eat or just your regular old
Okay.
table salt
Okay.
will not replete you
That makes
to the
sense.
level.
And
Yeah.
I'm definitely putting this in the show notes. So it's either the
Yeah.
Celtic salt or the Redmond salt.
Yep. And
Yeah.
and
Okay.
Redmond's by far is my favorite. It's a salt from Utah, the salt flats.
Okay.
And I like it because I know where it's coming from. It's from Utah. We're not out of country. And it's processed in Utah. So that's my favorite. I'll be on repeat. I'll say that 100 times
Okay.
probably by the time this is over, but it's the one that, yes, that one repletes you. Table salt doesn't do as good of a job and can mess with our blood pressure. It's strange because, yeah, I was in the camp of, oh, we got to watch your salt. But if you are active and you are hiking, you're biking, you're doing things to push your body, you need to replete the salt, and definitely knowing where your labs stand will give you a really good sense. So if your sodium is not 142, 145-ish in that range, you're probably dipping a little bit when you work out, and you could probably get a little bit more strength, stamina, and energy. And especially if you are having energy issues. More often than not, someone who's kind of burnt out, someone who's been like burning the midnight oil, pushing themselves, more often than not, the sodium will be low and the calcium will be low. And those two minerals alone can change a lot of things. I just did a podcast with a gal who's a registered dietitian, and that's what she does. She talks about minerals in her practice, and like she was so on it with everything I say. And I'm like, yes, this is exactly what we should be teaching in kindergarten, I think.
Right. Right. We should know these things about our body. In fact,
Right.
I will make sure that we link to that episode of your
Yeah, Kaylee,
podcast too.
yeah, Kaylee DeVitt, great
Okay.
gal, good stuff there. Um,
Okay.
yeah, she's awesome too for hair mineral analysis labs. That's her thing. And those can give you a lot of info too, and they're relatively cost effective, and you don't have to have a blood draw. So for
Oh,
those
how
of you who are
fun.
like those of you who are like, I do not want to have my blood drawn, but I want to know where my electrolytes are at, hair. Easy
Hair.
enough.
Okay. Got it.
Mm-hmm. So protein we've got here, protein is at, I would say, a little low normal. In my book, I like it a little bit more towards 7.5, 8-ish, even up towards right to that top end of things, because I want people keeping their protein in the system. Of course, as long as the kidneys can handle it, those are special circumstances. But I would say Kelly could use a little more protein just based on what I'm seeing here.
Okay. I will,
Yeah.
I will get on it because
Yes.
yeah.
All right. So this AG ratio, this is that albumin, which is below there. And we saw globulin. We had talked about globulin before. Globulin has to do with your immune complexes. Albumin has to do a lot with just kind of healing in the body. And it's a protein. And it's another marker that tells us what's going on with proteins. And so in terms of albumins, I would say Kelly's doing great there. The AG ratio, this one, if anyone has fatigue or is thinking they have thyroid stuff or they've got hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's, watching the AG ratio is important. It is your kind of gauge as to what's going on in your blood for metabolism. That ratio, oddly enough, will creep up when your blood is becoming more sticky. So your blood sugar is going up, your this albumin to globulin ratio goes up, because what happens with sticky, these guys will grab things and they'll hold more in the blood. So the proteins and the sugar bind together. And so if the proteins and sugar are binding together, we will see this AG ratio increase. That means we've got some work to do with blood sugar. That means we got some work to do in terms of metabolism of your carbohydrates. So something to look at. And typically, I'm not going to worry about that until we're a little bit towards the higher end of the ratio. And so you can see here we're at 2.4, 2.9 is the high end here. So Kelly's got a ways to go before her blood's really sticky and grabbing proteins and carrying them around. So she's all right. But if you were towards the end of that, and LabCorp, oddly enough, and this is where some of these labs gets confusing for folks, because LabCorp is 2.2 in terms of their higher end of normal. And so when I have lab guides, I don't write out the optimal ranges, because every lab's different. And so then people might be getting really upset going, I have this, but it's not the case based on that particular lab range. So that's my spiel on the AG ratio that is connected to sticky blood and blood sugar metabolism stuff. Albumin, we talked about. Alk phos. So this is alkaline phosphatase. This is an enzyme from your liver. And if it's like 8 times the normal, 4 times the normal, now we're looking at liver or bone cancer. Not the case here with Kelly. And if it's below 40, if it's in the 30s, now we've got something that I like to call malnutrition. It means you're not getting the nutrients in to help support your body and your enzymes and your liver health as well. So if that number is below 40, that's definitely an indicator that we've got issues. If we're creeping up over 150 a little bit, I'm going to be like, your liver might be a little bogged down in time for a detox. And if we're like I said, 3 to 4 times or 8 times that number, now you got to go look at liver bone cancer. Just make sure that is not happening. I've also seen alk phos get funky when someone's having issues with bones. And in particular, not the bone cancer, but things like osteopenia, osteoporosis, or extreme cases of vitamin D deficiency. Alkaline phosphatase can go up and kind of cause an alarm. So if you notice your levels up, or it's like on the high end of normal, go back to what's going on with my vitamin D, because that could be connected. Another little tidbit there. Now, ALT and AST, those are your liver enzymes. Those guys tell us the health of your liver. If your liver cells are dumping out enzymes, that means that they're having some issues. And we've got a little bit higher of a normal on that ALT there for Kelly. I usually have to ask, and I don't know if she's going to remember back to December what she was doing on December 6th, the day before these labs were drawn. But if you had labs drawn a day before, like a day after a hike or day after a more intense workout, these enzymes will be elevated. That is normal. I expect that in my athletic folks. And a lot of docs don't think about it if they've not been in the fitness space. So it is something that if you are going to get labs that have the enzymes on them, and I did already say you could get this back and forth before an event, or after an event, just to see where your electrolytes are. Just know that your enzymes are going to be elevated if you do this. Like, say you want to know what an 8-hour hike does to your electrolytes. Just know your enzymes are going to be up a little bit after an 8-hour hike, especially if there's a lot of elevation gain. Same thing goes if you're running marathons, half marathons, or lifting really heavy in the gym. You name it, it's possible it's going up. So Kelly, do you know what happened?
I just looked at my schedule, but I don't have my actual workout schedule here, so I don't know what was happening the day before.
Okay.
So yes, I'm clueless.
So based on that and not knowing, what I typically will do is 2 things. We wait till your next round and we go, okay, let's just see. And then the other side of it is, and you don't have this indicator per se, you didn't fast for this test. So that's one of the things I'm like, it could be you processing carbs, and the body kind of processing things. Not as likely, but It's a thing. The other thing is if someone did fast and their blood sugar markers were off, meaning their glucose was higher, maybe they even had a hemoglobin A1C, so that's blood sugar over time tested, and say it was in a pre-diabetes level like 5.7, and say on top of that they had their cholesterol done and their triglycerides are high. If all of those things are trending high or high and the liver enzymes are trending high, we might be looking at fatty liver. You will tend to see kind of things show up before fatty liver gets officially diagnosed. Now, can you reverse fatty liver? Yes. What is the answer? Balance your blood sugar, work on the protein, work on exercise, things of that nature. So here, I'm kind of wondering if it might be a fitness thing for you, but we have to see. We have to
Okay.
just wait a
We'll
couple
we'll
months.
look at the next ones, right?
See if
Yeah.
we got a trend. See if we got a trend. And so Billy Rubin, we already talked about. I think we might have got through all of them at this
I
point.
think we did. I think we
Yeah.
did.
Yeah, there's a lot. And that's just one chem panel. And a lot of links you can find. And so oftentimes when people ask me like, "Doc, I want to run one thing, but I'm not sure, what's going to give me the most bang for my buck that I can ask my doc for, or I can, pay cash for and not be out of, you know, the pocket too much." That one. And then I would often sometimes add so it's a complete blood count. So CBC with differential and platelets. And what that means is it shows us the breakdown of your white blood cells. So I can see the different individual ones. And then with the platelets, we can see if there's any inflammation happening in the liver. And if it's low, now we might be looking at viral stuff. If it's high, now we might be looking at a bogged down liver that needs a little detox. So I would pair the comprehensive metabolic panel we looked at now and the complete metabolic. It probably would not cost you much more than $50 at the most. And worth a lot to just get a baseline on yourself there.
Wow. Okay. And I know I've had you I've been like hugging you all afternoon, but I have to ask one more question.
It's
So
fine.
when somebody goes out and they get their panel, whether it's from their doctor or they do it on their own, I'm just going to kind of rehash here real quick. Probably best if they can to do it fasting.
Mhm,
And then once they get it, they can contact you. Actually, they can go right to your website, and I'm going to link
mm,
in your website. They go
mhm,
right to your website. They make an appointment, and you just will go through all of this with them.
mhm, mhm.
Wow. See,
Yep,
that's amazing.
yep,
Sorry, I shouldn't be amazed, but I am amazed. Like, I think it's so cool because it is true that in modern medicine, we're a little tight for time with the doctors.
mhm,
And to have a doctor that will actually sit down and go through all of this and explain everything to you and then say, next go round,
mhm.
not only should you get all of these, but maybe you want to check this too. And don't go out and hike, Kilimanjaro 2 days before you get your blood work done, because of course I would never have thought that that would make a difference. Actually, I just always think that, you wake up the next day and everything's
Yeah.
reset.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I didn't know until I started to get into it and worked with athletes and started to see these trends. Same thing goes. I lived in the mountains in Colorado for a long time and started to see the trends with high altitude shift too. And so
Oh
there's
yeah.
lots of trends that'll happen to based on certain intricacies. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute, I'm seeing this happen. Oh, wait a minute, this. So yeah, and unfortunately, the conventional docs are not taught that unless they learn it from experience.
Right. Right. Well, thank you so much for being here. And I will ask you, is there anything else that you want to say, or, I mean, mention your website.
Sure.
Your podcast is The Health Fix. We are going to be linking to a couple of episodes in there, and a lot of different things that you said about in the show notes. But tell us how to find you and
Mhm.
anything else that you'd like to share.
Sure, sure. Definitely my website, drjkrausnd.com. And then Instagram. I put a lot of things on Instagram with labs. I actually will be putting some up again today since I found that a lot of people were interested in this after our conversation. And so on Instagram, I'm at Dr. Janine, Jannine Kraus, Krause. And so you'll find other little tidbits that I'm going for there. And that's the best place to find me. Those two, and then my podcast, The Health Fix. Yeah.
Okay. And we will link to everything.
Mhm.
And once again, I want to say thank you so much for being here. For me, it was utterly fascinating because, it's all about me right this second because it was my labs. But I'm hoping that the people who are listening also went, wait a second. let's think about what we're getting.
Yeah. 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 It's important. It's important to know your body because unfortunately this day and age, I wish it wasn't so. We have to self-advocate. So this is the way to do it. And I'm happy to teach anybody that's willing to learn.
Thank you again.
My pleasure.